Lewis Hamilton didn't just finish 7th in Miami. He exposed a Ferrari problem no one saw coming. One lap earlier, the car felt incredible, one of the best all season. Then suddenly, it lost almost 8/10 when it mattered most. Same setup, same session, completely different performance. That's not a mistake. That's a hidden weakness, and now the entire grid knows it. Coming into Miami, Ferrari didn't look like a team about to fail. They looked ready to strike. From the very beginning of the session, there was a clear signal that something was different. The SF26 Evo wasn't just keeping up, it was building momentum. In the first segment, Leclerc is almost identical to Norris. Just a tiny gap, almost nothing. Hamilton follows closely, sitting comfortably inside the top group, no signs of instability, no visible struggle. Everything looks controlled, measured, exactly what you expect from a car that's about to fight for pole. But then the second segment arrives, and Ferrari suddenly becomes something else entirely. Leclerc goes fastest. Hamilton jumps into third. And more importantly, the car looks alive. Sharp on entry, stable in the middle of the corner, strong on exit. Every phase of the lap connects perfectly. For the first time in the session, Ferrari isn't reacting to anyone. They're setting the pace. And that's where Hamilton's words start to carry real weight. Because drivers don't casually say a car feels incredible. They say it when everything clicks, when the balance is perfect, when the confidence is there, when the lap comes naturally. And that's exactly what he felt in that moment, which tells you something critical. Ferrari didn't just have speed. They had pole position speed. Real, undeniable performance. But here's where the tension starts to build. Because qualifying is not about how good the car feels in one moment. It's about whether you can repeat it. And everything Ferrari showed in those first 2 segments, everything that suggested they could fight at the front, was about to be tested in the only place that matters. One lap, final segment, and that's exactly where everything begins to fall apart. One lap, and suddenly everything Ferrari built disappears. Leclerc attacks first. The pace is still there, the car still has the potential, but one small mistake in Sector 2 is enough to break the lap. Just a slight loss of momentum, just enough time gone, and the fight for pole is over. That's the first crack. But Hamilton's situation is even more revealing, because there is no clear mistake, no lock-up, no big slide, nothing obvious. He completes the lap, and it's simply not there. 7th place, almost 3/4 of a second off Norris. And that's where everything stops making sense. Because minutes earlier, this was one of the best cars he had driven all season. Now it's not even in the fight. Same session, same conditions, completely different performance. And that's the moment where Hamilton's words become more than just a comment. Something didn't work. That sentence changes everything. Because drivers at this level don't say that lightly. They know when they make a mistake. They know when tires are not ready. They know when they missed a corner. This wasn't that. This was a loss of performance without a clear reason. And that points to something deeper. Because what Ferrari showed in Miami wasn't just inconsistency. It was instability in how the car reaches its peak performance. Think about it. In the second segment, everything aligned perfectly. The balance, the grip, the energy deployment, all working together. But in the final segment, that alignment was gone. Not dramatically, not visibly, just enough to remove the edge. And in Formula One, that's all it takes. Because at this level, you don't need a big problem to lose positions. You just need a small one, a slightly different tire window, a tiny variation in energy release, a subtle change in balance. And suddenly, you're not fighting for pole anymore. That's exactly what happened to Ferrari. They didn't lose everything. They lost just enough. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because small problems are the hardest to fix. They hide. They appear under pressure. And by the time you understand them, you've already lost the moment. And that's why Miami matters so much. Because it didn't show Ferrari at their worst. It showed them at their best. And still failing to deliver. And when that happens, the problem is no longer about speed. It's about control. And this is where the real problem finally reveals itself. Because what happened to Hamilton wasn't random. It was predictable. Not before the session. But once you understand how this Ferrari actually works, the SF26 Evo is not a slow car. It's not even an inconsistent car in the traditional sense. It's a car that depends on a very specific window, and when it falls outside of it, even slightly, the performance drops instantly. Think about the pattern. First segment strong. Second segment dominant. Final segment gone. That's not coincidence. That's a car that peaks early and struggles to sustain it. And here's where the technical side becomes critical. Because Miami introduced a regulation change that reshaped everything. Energy recovery reduced. Regeneration increased. That balance shift changed how cars deliver performance across a lap. Some teams adapted immediately. McLaren found a way to maximize it. Mercedes lost part of their advantage. And Ferrari ended up in the most complicated position because their car still produces speed, but not in a stable way. According to the session data, Ferrari was one of the fastest cars in the early phases, especially when everything was in the right condition. But when it came to that final lap, that final moment where everything has to align again, they couldn't reproduce it. And that's the key. Repetition. Because in Formula One, it's not enough to find performance once. You have to find it again and again and again. Under pressure. With changing track conditions. With tires that behave slightly differently every run. And Ferrari couldn't do that. Hamilton felt the peak. Then he lost it. Leclerc built toward it, and then made a mistake trying to hold it. Both drivers telling the same story in different ways. The car is fast, but it's fragile. Not physically, but in how it delivers performance. And that creates a very specific kind of pressure. Because now, every lap becomes a question. Are we in the window or not? And if the answer is uncertain, the driver can't fully commit. That's the invisible effect. The one you don't see on the timing screen, but you feel in the lap time. Because hesitation at this level is everything. And that's why Hamilton's statement matters so much. Something didn't work. It's not just about that lap. It's about not knowing why it didn't work. And that's the real issue Ferrari is facing. Not a lack of speed. A lack of certainty. Because when you don't fully understand where your performance comes from, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, you can't rely on it. So now, Ferrari is in the worst possible position. They know they are fast enough. They've seen it. They've felt it. But they can't guarantee it when it matters most. And in a season where margins are this small, that's the difference between fighting for wins and watching them slip away. And this is where everything finally connects and the real answer becomes impossible to ignore. Because Miami didn't just expose a bad qualifying. It exposed the true identity of Ferrari's car. Not slow, not broken, unstable at the limit. A car that can reach an incredibly high peak, but cannot live there. And that's the difference that decides championships. Look at what actually happened. In the second segment, Ferrari is the reference. Fastest car, best balance, full confidence from both drivers. That's the peak. That's what the car can do. But in the final segment, when everything has to be repeated under maximum pressure, they lose it. Not completely, just enough. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because a big problem is easy to fix. You see it, you understand it, you solve it. But a small, invisible drop in performance, that's the hardest thing in Formula One. Because it hides in details. Tire preparation, energy deployment timing, micro changes in balance. Things that don't show clearly on data, but completely change the lap. And that's exactly what Hamilton felt. The car didn't collapse. It disconnected. That perfect feeling gone. And without that connection, you can't attack the lap. You can't commit. You can't extract the final tenths. That's why the gap suddenly appears. Not because the car is slow, but because the driver can't access its maximum anymore. And this is where the comparison with McLaren becomes brutal. Because Norris had a car that required precision. But once he found the window, it stayed there. Ferrari? They found the window, and then lost it. That's the difference between potential and control. And control is everything. Because over a full season, you don't win by being the fastest once. You win by being fast every time it matters. And right now, Ferrari can't guarantee that. So the real story behind Hamilton's 7th place is not the result itself. It's what it reveals. A car that promises more than it delivers. A car that feels incredible, but only for a moment. A car that cannot yet be trusted at the exact moment everything is decided. And that's the hidden problem. Not visible on the timing screen. Not obvious in one lap. But impossible to ignore once you see the pattern. Because if Ferrari cannot stabilize that performance, if they cannot keep the car inside that perfect window when it matters most, then every weekend will follow the same story. Hope in the early phases, expectation in the middle, and disappointment at the end. And that's the final truth Miami exposed. Hamilton didn't just reveal a bad lap. He revealed a limitation. A limitation that could define Ferrari's entire season. Because in Formula One, having the speed is not enough. You have to control it. And right now, Ferrari can't.